I will not stand here and be treated like I do not belong. You strip me of my dignity as if it were nothing.
Procedure is clear. Power does not bend for exceptions.
The room seemed to hold its breath, as if walls and chandeliers themselves were waiting for the next word. In that silence, every choice carried the weight of justice or its absence. What would unfold in the next moment could change not only the fate of one guest, but the conscience of everyone watching. This is only the beginning, and the next turn will be even more gripping. If this moment stirs something in you, leave a comment with one word: justice. And don't forget to follow for the next chapter of the story. The revolving doors sighed as Monica Johnson stepped from the bright July heat into the cool hush of the lobby. The peninsula Chicago gleamed around her. Polished stone, brass fixtures, fresh lilies, and the steady whisper of luggage wheels. Outside on Michigan Avenue, Taste of Chicago has spilled music and the smell of grilled corn into the air. Inside, a bellhop in a neat cap offered a courteous nod. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Welcome." She returned the greeting with a gentle thank you and moved toward the front desk, where a line of guests lifted paper cups of coffee and scrolled their phones. She carried no designer tote, no logo luggage, just the compact carry-on and the calm of someone who planned her days by the hour and kept her promises by the letter. Richard Collins noticed her before she spoke. He was a tall man with a crisp tie and a practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. Emily Turner stood at his right with a poised chin, and Daniel Brooks, younger and restless, hovered near the keyboard, as if proximity alone could prove authority. Monica waited until an elderly couple finished checking in. She offered a kind smile to the couple as they collected their keys and wished them a pleasant stay. When her turn came, she stepped forward, placed her reservation confirmation neatly on the counter, and said in a steady voice, "Good afternoon. I'm here for check-in." With no, Emily's eyes made a quick journey from Monica's travel sneakers to her simple black blouse. "Name, please," she said. The syllables clipped. "Monica Johnson, Penthouse Suite." The word penthouse drew a slight lift of Richard's brows, the sort of reflex that tries to pass as curiosity. Daniel leaned in to peer at the screen. The cursor blinked. The lobby's music softened into the background, a piano tune that always felt like a pleasant memory. Monica stood quietly, hands folded on the handle of her carry-on. She had been in rooms like this since she was a teenager, sometimes as a guest, sometimes as a speaker, sometimes only waiting for someone who was. The marble, she knew, remembered more footsteps than anyone could count, and he always remembered who was welcome to make them. "Penthouse," Richard repeated as if gently correcting a child. "Are you sure you've come to the right property?" Monica met his gaze with a polite stillness. "Yes." He smiled, slow and professional. "May I see a government-issued identification and a credit card for incidentals?" "Of course." She placed both on the counter, aligned and ready. The identification was current, the card sleek and dark, the kind that carried a quiet weight. Emily lifted the card between two fingers, as though it might smudge, and tilted it against the downlights. "We've had a lot of, well, creative reservations this month," she said, a skim of sugar on the edge of her voice. "Summer crowds. You understand." "Oh," Monica offered a small nod. Understanding was a thing she had learned too well. Outside, a tour bus sighed to a stop. A child's laughter echoed between glass and stone. Inside, a bellhop accepted a folded bill and a thank you from a businessman in a navy blazer. He tipped his cap again, and the lobby returned to its measured rhythm. Daniel typed, frowned, and typed again. "I don't see it," he murmured, though the screen held the confirmation number that Monica had printed as a courtesy to save everyone's time. Richard moved closer, a manager's gravity settling over the space. He looked at Monica's face, then at her clothes, then back at the screen, as if the sequence could make numbers disappear. "It happens," he said, soothing and final. "Sometimes third-party sites misroute reservations. May I ask how you booked?" "Directly," Monica said. Her voice remained warm. "A confirmation was sent this morning. The suite was prepared." Emily passed the identification to Richard without looking away from Monica. "Our penthouse level has very specific requirements," she said. "We take brand image seriously." The piano note in the air held a fraction longer than it should have. Monica rested her fingertips on the cool counter. So do I. I. A young concierge at the side podium glanced up, drawn by the tone more than the words. Sophia Martinez, tidy in navy, had a way of listening that made people feel as if doors were opening. She had seen the name Monica Johnson earlier when she reviewed arrivals. She remembered the penthouse tag, the notation for a personalized amenity, the quiet instruction to ensure privacy. Now she watched the manager's shoulders stiffen and the line of his mouth sharpen. She glanced at the screen one more time and then at Monica's face. Something in her posture said, I see what is happening, and I do not accept it. Richard's smile thinned. The penthouse is a very high tier. Perhaps there has been an error. Monica neither flinched nor fidgeted. She thought of the street outside, the lake light brushing the skyline, the families tasting summer on paper plates. She thought of the many times a desk like this had taught her a familiar lesson. When people tell you what they think you are, believe them, and then decide who you will be anyway. We can call, Emily offered, already making a show of picking up the phone. But it could take a while. I have time, Monica said. The words settled gently but stayed in place. A bell chimed at the revolving doors. A group of guests entered with shopping bags and the satisfied conversation of a day well spent. A man in a straw hat paused at the floral display to admire the lilies. He tipped a small cash note into a discreet box and smiled at the attendant. Beautiful arrangements, he said. The attendant thanked him with the gracious ease of someone trained to make moments smooth. Daniel cleared his throat. Do you have a different card? He asked. Sometimes these hesitated, hunting for a neutral word. These premium cards flag our system. Sama. These premium cards, Monica repeated softly, not as a question but as a recognition of how people build scaffolding around their discomfort. She considered the many times she had carried a room with nothing but her patience and the truth, and how often that had been mistaken for permission to go further. Richard folded his arms. Not in hostility, he would have said, but in policy. We've had incidents, he explained to no one in particular. People try to pass through spaces they haven't earned. We have to protect our guests. Sophia lifted her chin. Mr. Collins, she said, carefully respectful. The name is in our system. I saw it this morning. Richard's eyes flicked toward her without turning his head. Thank you, Sophia. Well handled. Monica watched the exchange as a person watches a shoreline, measuring the tide. She thought of elders who taught her to greet the room before speaking, to shake a hand firmly, to leave $1 for service even when service forgot you. She thought of a cousin who loved the city's jazz bars and who never arrived anywhere without saying good evening to the doorman. Courtesy was not a costume for her. It was a practice, like breathing. Emily placed the card on the counter and touched it with her index finger as if pinning it in place. We'll need to hold this while we verify, she said. House policy. Monica's gaze lowered to the finger, then rose again to Emily's eyes. Verification is standard, she agreed. Holding a guest card without consent is not. Daniel glanced at Richard, a quick dart of uncertainty. Richard's reply came smooth. We're within our rights, he said. When doubt arises, we secure the account to prevent loss. Yeah. Sophia took a small step closer. Not enough to challenge a manager in front of guests, just enough to bring her voice near Monica's ear. If you like, I can reprint your confirmation and walk it over. She kept her tone neutral, her eyes calm. Monica almost smiled at the quiet grace of the offer. Thank you, Monica said. Let's give them a moment. Changzi, a newsstand by the window, sold glossy magazines and thick Sunday editions even on weekdays for travelers who liked the feel of paper between their fingers. An older gentleman in a linen jacket adjusted his glasses and turned a page with soft care. The world outside the window moved in streaks of sunlight. A cyclist in a bright jersey coasted past a fountain. A street musician tested a saxophone phrase that slipped, honeyed, into the lobby when the doors opened. Gauls, I.S. Johnson, Richard said, returning to the formal address as if it might cloth the scene impropriety. I appreciate your patience. These verifications can be sensitive. Our penthouse floor is reserved for a very specific clientele. Monica held his gaze. guests with confirmed reservations. He nodded a single beat. Exactly. Sophia's fingers hesitated above her keyboard. She knew there was a simple path. Print the paperwork, match the identification, hand over the key packet with a sincere welcome. She also knew what it cost to take that path against the weight of a manager's stare. Her mother's voice came to her, a reminder formed in the kitchen, smaller than this lobby's coat closet. Do right and stand up straight. Emily shifted her stance. We can offer you a standard room for tonight while we sort this out, she suggested, a kindness that sounded like a verdict. The penthouse requires a formal review. Monica's reply was gentle. The reservation I made is the reservation I will keep. Behind them, a guest thanked a bellhop with a handshake and a folded bill. Appreciate you, sir, the guest said. You saved my back. The bellhop smiled and said it was his pleasure. In that small exchange, Monica heard the music she preferred. Acknowledgement given, dignity returned. Richard's smile thinned another degree. He angled his body so the next person in line could see past Monica, an unspoken nudge, an invitation to hurry what he had decided was a misunderstanding. The line hesitated, then took a polite step to the side. No one wanted to push. No one wanted to be the person who made a scene. The lobby seemed to exhale, then hold still. Monica felt the weight of years she did not wear on her face. She remembered a road trip when she was 20 and a clerk who asked 3 times if she could really afford the rate. She remembered an airport lounge where a man complimented her on finding such a convincing replica of a premium card. She remembered her grandmother's kitchen table and the lesson given without bitterness. Some people will ask for proof even after you've shown it. Decide how long you will keep showing. She smiled, a small curve of the mouth that belonged to no one but her. I can wait, she said again. But this time, the words did not sound like patience. They sounded like a clock that had finally been set to the right hour. Let's do this, Emily said, reaching for the card. It will be safer in the back office while we check. Sophia drew a breath, ready to speak, then paused. The lilies breathed their perfume into the air. The pianist, invisible behind a cluster of palms, found a familiar bridge and eased the melody toward it. A family walking through the lobby paused by the windows to point at the skyline and the shimmer of the lake beyond. The boy in the baseball cap pressed his forehead to the glass and laughed. Monica straightened her shoulders, not in challenge but in care for herself. She had learned to do that too, to occupy space without apology. She touched the handle of her carry-on, then released it. The line behind her remained patient. The elderly gentleman with the newspaper looked up over his glasses and studied the tableau with a thoughtful expression. Richard adjusted his tie and made the last small decision a person makes before choosing who they are. Miss Johnson, he said, we cannot proceed with the penthouse check-in until we verify. If you prefer not to wait, there are other properties on the boulevard. The words landed with the soft cruelty of something practiced. The piano held a single note, and then the note let go. Monica's eyes moved once across the desk, across the hands, across a posture that would later pretend it had only been policy. She felt the temperature of the moment drop to a precise degree. Monica tilted a faint smile and set a glossy black credit card on the counter. The entire lobby seemed to hold its breath. Emily Turner let the glossy card rest beneath her fingers, as if the very surface might confess something if held long enough. The piano in the lobby kept its measured phrases, and the air, cool from the vents above, carried the faint lift of lilies and the darker warmth of fresh coffee. A bellhop rolled a chrome cart toward the elevators and offered a soft welcome back to a couple in linen jackets. Monica Johnson stayed exactly where she was, her posture at ease, the corners of her mouth neutral, as though she had learned long ago that stillness can be a quiet kind of ballast. The scene from moments earlier hung between everyone. The suggestion that a penthouse request was out of place, the smile that tried to turn doubt into policy. Outside the glass, the city glowed with summer light. Inside, the front desk drew its own borders with a polished edge. Direct booking? Emily asked, already knowing the answer but preferring the ritual of asking again. Yes, Monica said. Her tone had the calm of someone who has practiced courtesy under all kinds of ceilings. Daniel Brooks angled the monitor away from the lobby so the reflection of the chandelier would not distract him, then tapped in the confirmation number from the printed page Monica had placed on the counter with careful precision. The cursor flickered. He watched it too closely, as if a digit might decide to become a different digit under pressure. "I am not seeing it populate," he murmured. Richard Collins leaned in, tie straight, smile narrow. "Sometimes direct confirmations get delayed in our system," he explained, choosing a voice that could pass for sympathetic. "High season does that." Sophia Martinez glanced from her concierge podium. She remembered the morning's list, arrivals with notes, special amenities, a name she recognized because it had been tagged for quiet preparation. She had not meant to be drawn into the front desk gravity, but she could feel the tug. In training, they called it stepping in without stepping on. She took a breath, then stayed where she was for now, watching Emily's hands, Richard's shoulders, Monica's eyes. Emily lifted the identification to the light. "We have a very high bar on the penthouse floor," she said, the words arranged with care. "We protect the brand image. I am sure you appreciate that." "I appreciate standards," Monica replied. "I appreciate when they are applied evenly." A guest with a newspaper folded under his arm drifted closer to the flowers, pretending to read the placard about the arrangement while his attention tilted toward the counter. The pianist shifted into a tune from decades past, the kind of melody that makes older hearts nod. At the far end of the lobby, a small caf window slid open and a barista handed out iced coffees, the plastic lids faintly hissing as they snapped into place. A woman thanked him and tucked a dollar bill into the tip jar, and the barista touched 2 fingers to the brim of his cap by way of gratitude. "Miss Johnson," Richard said with a polite dip of his head, "we will need to secure your card while we verify the booking. It is a precaution. It protects you as well." Monica's gaze did not move. "You may verify. You may not secure my property without consent." Daniel looked up quickly, a reflex he could not smooth. "It will be in the safe for a moment," he said, attempting a friendlier angle. "Back office. Standard." "Standard," Monica repeated, and let the word rest in the air until it revealed its shape. "What standard asks you to remove a card from a guest who has presented valid identification and a written confirmation?" Richard's smile hardened by a degree too small to notice. "The standard that prevents misuse. We have had, shall we say, inventive visitors this summer. It makes everyone careful. It makes us particular." Sophia could feel the moment tipping. She stepped from her station and approached with measured steps, allowing the presence of her concierge pin to do as much work as her voice. "Mr. Collins," she said quietly, respectful as the handbook required. "Miss Johnson is on today's penthouse arrival list. Her name is associated with an executive note. I saw it." Richard did not turn, only shifted his eyes toward her. "Thank you, Sophia. We will take it from here." It was the velvet version of "not now," the kind of dismissal no one could quote later, yet everyone felt. Emily's thumb tapped the edge of the card. "House policy allows a temporary hold when a reservation cannot be located immediately," she said. "We can expedite this if we bring it into the back." "What cannot be located?" Monica answered. "It's often what has not been looked for correctly." Daniel flushed. Whether in offense or embarrassment, he was not sure. He typed again, slower, then faster. "There is no Johnson on the penthouse list I can access," he said. Then added, because something in the calm at the other side of the counter unnerved him, "Perhaps the spelling." "Monica Johnson," Monica said. "2 names that are simple to spell." Richard lifted his hands in a conciliatory gesture that was not conciliatory at all. "We can offer you a beautiful standard room for tonight, while we sort this out. A complimentary amenity for the inconvenience. The penthouse requires a review when there is any uncertainty." Monica's voice stayed warm. "The reservation I made is not uncertain. A family came in from the afternoon brightness, the parents in Cubs caps, the boy in a t-shirt with a skyline printed across the chest. The boy pointed up at the coffer ceiling and said something about palaces. His mother laughed and said the word belonged to someone else, then smoothed the boy's hair. They moved past the front desk toward the elevators, and their reflection slid along the marble like a kind thought. Emily lifted the phone. "I will ring for security to assist with the queue while we take this to the back," she said. "It will keep things calm." Sophia stepped half a pace forward. The concierge manual lived in her, but so did something older than manuals. Miss Johnson's name appears with a VIP tag, she said, voice steady. It is in the system. Bye, bye, bye. Richard turned fully now, his smile gone. One more word, he said softly, and we can discuss your role off the floor. Sophia held her ground for a heartbeat, then shifted back the quarter step that allowed her to remain in the scene without violating the invisible line. She felt her pulse in her throat. The lilies breathed their sweetness. The pianist slowed the bridge. Monica exhaled, the kind of breath that steadies hands. She addressed no one in particular. Verification is simple. Fairness is simpler. Daniel slid open the narrow drawer under the counter, and the faint clink of keys touched the air. Emily's fingers tightened on the card. Richard nodded once, and in that small nod was an entire way of seeing. Daniel stood, small silver key in hand, and the light caught the metal just enough to make it look like ceremony. House policy, Emily repeated, and the counter's lacquer surface mirrored the line of her jaw. Monica thought of all the rooms in which someone tried to turn her patience into permission. She thought of a trip on a winter weekend when a clerk asked 3 times whether she was sure she knew what the rate meant. She thought of a summer afternoon when a lounge desk told her membership cards could be borrowed or found. She thought of the lesson her grandmother had repeated even when her hands ached from cooking for a houseful. Greet people like they belong, and you will not have to unteach yourself rudeness later. Do not remove my card, she said. Richard's voice lost its last layer of silk. Miss Johnson, you are holding up other guests. He pivoted slightly, offering the line an apologetic half-smile. We appreciate your patience, he told them. We will be right with you. Dong, dong, bi, dong, 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 dong. A businessman with a navy blazer glanced at his watch, then shook his head in a gesture that said it was fine. A woman in pearls set her tote on the carpet and rested her hand on the handle of her suitcase. The older gentleman by the flowers folded his newspaper and held it at his side like an unused opinion. Sophia tried again, a different angle. Mr. Collins, if I may, I can reprint Miss Johnson's confirmation and walk it through with the front desk notes. It will take less than a minute. This is not a concierge matter, Richard said. Each word clipped clean. Emily lifted the card. Daniel stepped toward the small side cabinet where the safe waited with its quiet claim to authority. Monica did not reach across the counter. She did not raise her voice. She simply watched. And in that watching was a witness to every slight that tries to pass for policy. It is curious, Monica said, which guests are offered standard rooms and apologies, and which guests are offered hurdles. Carrington. Richard shifted his weight. He had been in this job long enough to know how to let a moment slide past and how to harden it into precedent. He chose hardness. We have a responsibility to the brand, he said, to the space, to all of our guests, and to the truth, Monica said, quiet as a bell in another room. Emily's hand hovered over the card as if waiting for gravity to make the decision for her. Daniel held the key a little too high, like a prop in a ceremony he did not fully understand. The pianist lifted into a higher register, and for a breath the lobby seemed to hear itself. Sophia looked at Monica, met her calm, and felt something settle in her own chest. That was not fear. She found the reservation list again, scrolled, and there it was, as it had been that morning. The name, the penthouse tag, the small notation that marked the booking as a priority with a private note. M's, Johnson's reservation is valid, she said, clearly enough for the line to hear, gently enough to keep the room from splintering. Richard turned his face toward her with a look that belonged in a colder climate. Sophia, he said, if you value your schedule, step back. The words did not rise, they did not need to. Sophia felt them like a draft under a door. She held Monica's eyes for one more steady second, then returned to her podium, not retreating so much as relocating. Monica acknowledged her with a small nod that thanked her for speaking and for staying. Richard smoothed his tie, the gesture of a man resetting the mirror. Now, he said to Emily, let us proceed. He faced Monica with a smile that tried to show reason. We will sort this out. Please be patient. Monica's answer was the same as before, but this time it carried the weight of memory and intention together. I am patient, she said. I am not pliable. 好，孩子. The cafe window slid again. A cappuccino with a leaf in its foam changed hands, and the customer said, "This looks lovely," in a voice that had not yet learned a day's disappointment. A small child pressed the call button by the elevator with the pure satisfaction of making a light respond. The concierge phone rang once and stopped the way calls do when someone decides to handle a matter in person. Daniel hesitated, key still raised. Emily finally made the smallest motion with her hand toward the side cabinet. The move was almost imperceptible. A private signal sent in public. Monica's gaze followed the gesture, not the key, and saw not metal and mechanics but a habit closing over a person who had done nothing but ask for what she had already secured. Sophia drew a breath at her station, writing words that would climb a steeper hill. Her heart marked time in her throat. She thought of a phrase her mother used when the world was unfair. Stand up straight, even if your voice shakes. Richard angled his body again to the line, smoothing the path for the next guest, making room with his stance for the assumption that this would end in the back office with a form and an apology that would not call itself an apology. He was, to his mind, arranging order. He was, to anyone watching closely, arranging absence. The lobby's murmur shifted, almost imperceptibly, the way a lake lifts under a changing wind. A woman near the flowers looked from Monica to the card to Richard's steady expression. A man with a leather briefcase drew a slow breath and let it out without sound. Somewhere in the weave of voices, a new thread began to pull. Guests in the lobby began to pay attention, a few quietly taking out their phones. Olivia Parker angled her phone, so the lens caught the sweep of the lobby. The lilies, the brass, the line, the woman at the counter who would not budge. She glanced at Ethan Miller, who already had his streaming app open, the red indicator pulsing like a heartbeat. "This is going live," she whispered, and with a soft tap the moment widened. It no longer belonged only to polished stone and soft piano. It belonged to anyone who could hold a screen. A quiet murmur rose in the comments as the feed stabilized. People asked where they were, what was happening, whether the woman had done anything wrong. The piano dipped into a tune that felt like a memory from a different year, and the bellhop at the far end pretended not to notice that his card had become part of the frame. The barista at the cafe window slid an iced coffee across the counter, said thank you, and tucked a dollar bill into the tip jar from a grateful guest with a grin. Michigan Avenue burned in the afternoon brightness beyond the glass, but inside the light felt deliberate, as if the chandeliers had been coached for this. Ethan held his phone steady and spoke in the low voice of someone who understood microphones and rooms. "We are at the Peninsula Chicago. A woman with a confirmed reservation is being told she may have to take a standard room because her penthouse cannot be verified. Her identification and card are on the counter. Watch and listen." Hausen. At the desk, Monica Johnson kept her hands calmly folded on the handle of her carry-on. Richard Collins maintained a smile that made a show of patience. Emily Turner touched the black card with 2 fingertips as if contact alone could declare ownership. Daniel Brooks stood with a small silver key he had not yet used, uncertain how to hold it without looking theatrical. Sophia Martinez hovered at an angle that allowed her to see both the screen at the front desk and Monica's profile. She could feel the tug to act and the rule not to, the internal teetering every service worker learns to balance. Her heart thudded once, a firm reminder, and she took one measured step closer. Olivia shifted position until the camera caught Monica's face in 3/4 profile. "If I'm seeing this wrong," Olivia said softly into her mic, "somebody correct me, but I know what a confirmation looks like." Comments snake up the screen in a fast scroll. Strangers offering support, strangers offering doubt, strangers who had seen some version of this and had not filmed it. A child in a baseball cap stared openly. His mother rested a hand on his shoulder and whispered something that sounded like kindness. An elderly man folded his newspaper and tucked it under his arm. Attention sharpened. The pianist's left hand settled into a pattern that gave his right hand room for ornament, as if the music, too, needed a small, steady bass in order to say what it meant. "Miss Johnson," Richard said, smooth as hotel glass, "we are talking about a very particular space. We must be certain Beyond any question. Who we are admitting to that floor. Beyond any question, Monica repeated, her voice like a level placed on a countertop to see if it is true. She did not raise her volume, but Olivia's phone caught every syllable. So did Ethan's. Emily smoothed a non-existent wrinkle on the counter. Until we complete verification, she said, we will hold your card. It is a matter of policy. The words were nearly identical to what she had said before, but now they met an audience larger than a single lobby. A comment blinked across Olivia's screen. That is not a standard policy. Another arrived, ask for a manager. And another, he's the manager. Watch what he does. Sophia inhaled, then let it go. She turned slightly so she could address the front desk without raising her voice. Mr. Collins, she said, respectful and clear, the reservation is in the system. I saw the VIP tag this morning. Miss Johnson's name is on the penthouse list. Richard's smile faltered and took on a new edge. Sophia, thank you, he said, but we are following front desk procedure. You can return to your station. Ailan. Olivia caught the exchange, the small collision of a voice telling the truth and a voice protecting the shape of the room. Comments flashed. The concierge spoke up. Do not let them silence her. Someone wrote, I stayed there last year. This is not right. Daniel's fingers tapped the keyboard with a rustle of plastic keys. I still do not see it, he said. A little too loud, as if volume could make absence feel like fact. His eyes skittered toward the safe in its small cabinet, then back to the card as if to ask permission from air. Monica stood very straight without looking like a person bracing for impact. I have provided identification, she said. I have provided confirmation. She paused. You have provided doubt. Richard leaned on a phrase that made him comfortable. We have to protect the brand. A brand that is protected by fairness, Monica said, is a brand worth having. Was say. The barista wiped the counter with a circular motion. A small grace performed in background. The bellhop offered to stow a suitcase at the stand and handed a claim ticket to a woman in pearls who thanked him by name because she had read his badge. A man in a straw hat drifted closer to the lilies and breathed them in, then turned to watch with the stillness of someone measuring what to do. Ethan spoke to the viewers in his steady voice. If you are just joining, you are seeing a guest present identification and a confirmation. Her card is on the counter. She's being told there is a delay. The staff are pressing to hold the card in the back office. Olivia angled the phone and caught Emily's hand as it hovered. In the frame, the black card reflected a chandelier like a small, bright comet. The image felt symbolic, even if it was only physics. Comments streamed, do not let them take it. Ask for another manager. Talk to corporate. Someone typed, this is why we film. Sophia's palms felt damp. She thought of her mother's phrase, the one that had followed her out of childhood. Stand up straight, even if your voice shakes. Miss Johnson, she said, now speaking to Monica because the other route had been closed. If you would like me to reprint your confirmation and walk it to the desk, I can do that. I would appreciate that, Monica said. She kept her gaze on Richard because people deserve to be looked at when they are deciding who to be. Richard gestured toward the line as if to say he was trying to keep the world orderly. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced with trained warmth, thank you for your patience. We will move swiftly. The elderly gentleman with the folded newspaper gave him a civil nod without lowering his eyes from the counter. The family in Cubs caps stepped slightly aside but did not leave. Emily glanced down the length of the desk and then, with a small flicker of frustration, reached for Monica's forearm. Her fingers closed in an insistent tug, meant to be quiet and efficient, meant to look like assistance. The movement was not violent. It did not need to be. It was the sort of touch that assumes permission. Olivia's breath caught, and her phone caught the moment. The image jolted in a way viewers recognize, a frame shifting because someone could not quite believe what they were seeing. Ethan's dream held steadier, his camera trained, his voice suddenly sharper. Do not put your hands on her, he said, from his side of the lens. The words shaped by professional calm that had found its limit. Sophia stepped in, her concierge pin shining like a small badge of conscience. Please do not touch the guest, she said, and the phrasing, practiced and polite, carried more force than a shout because the posture behind it did not bend. Emily released her hold, the color climbing into her cheeks. Richard's smile fell away altogether. Daniel, startled, nearly dropped the key, then clutched it tighter, as if holding onto metal could save him from the softness of being unsure. A hush spread, not the soft kind that comes when a pianist lingers on a chord, but the collective intake that comes when the room realizes it will tell this story later. Olivia's comments surged. That is unacceptable. She touched her. People asked if anyone had called the general manager. Others wrote that the general manager was the man at the desk. A name someone recognized from a prior stay appeared, typed with unworried certainty. That is Richard. People do this when they want to sound like policy. Monica did not raise her voice. Please step back, she said evenly, and the steadiness in the words made them larger than volume. She turned her head just enough to include the line, the lilies, the piano, the camera held by a stranger. I have been patient. I will continue to be. I will not be moved without cause. Wait. Richard snapped a glance at Emily, then at Daniel, then at Sophia, and tried to retrieve the controlled tone that had worked for him a dozen times before. We are resolving this, he said. Not quite to anyone, not quite to everyone. We are following procedure. Sophia printed the confirmation. The paper slid out with a whisper and the faint heat that fresh ink carries. She read the line again. Monica Johnson, penthouse suite, executive note, and felt a steadiness return to her own spine. She walked to the counter and placed a page on the lacquered surface beside the card. It is here, she said. Penthouse arrival today. VIP tag. Olivia dipped the phone so the printed words came into focus. Comments popped like corn. People asked if the hotel would apologize. Others said apologies come later, after someone has first insisted on error. Richard barely glanced at the paper. This can be faked, he said too quickly, then seemed to hear himself and softened the consonants. We will cross check. Monica's face did not change. She had expected this line. It had many versions. She turned her eyes to the small safe, the key, the hand hovering. Return my card, she said. Daniel swallowed. We have not taken it, he stammered. You intended to, she said. The lobby's energy shifted in a way only attentive rooms can feel. A woman near the flowers stepped closer, phone now fully in her hand. A man in a navy blazer moved just enough to stand with his shoulder aligned to Monica's. The family in Cubs caps looked at one another and did not leave. Ethan's steady voice narrated the turn. Guests are gathering. The concierge has produced a printed confirmation. The manager is resisting acknowledgement. The card remains on the counter. Olivia caught a glimpse of the barista watching from his window. Towel paused over the counter, expression tightened into something like prayer. She felt the electric thread that runs through a moment when a group decides whether it is a group yet. Richard made a small motion with his chin, all the permission Emily needed to try again, with the phone, with intercom, with anything that might broaden the room and shrink this person. Her hand reached toward a button that would call for a presence behind the scenes. Sophia saw the move and spoke before the tone could sound. She's a guest, Sophia said. Treat her as one. 我娱乐. The comment stream tilted. People wrote that the concierge was the only one behaving like hospitality. Others said they were taking notes for their next stay. A few wondered if corporate would step in, and if so, how quickly. It happened the way visible things do. A shift of shoulders, a breath drawn and released, a throat cleared as if to test the instrument. The human ear knows a prelude to solidarity, even if the mind pretends to be surprised. Phones lifted at new angles. A murmur braided itself into something sturdier. Richard felt it and misread it as noise. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, reclaiming theatrical warmth, we will be right with you. Nobody moved. A bellhop, returning with an empty cart, paused by the lilies and waited for a cue that did not arrive. The pianist's melody found its way to the cadence at the end of a phrase and hovered as if not quite ready to land. Emily set the phone down, her lips a narrow line. Daniel stared at the key as if willing it to become invisible. Sophia stood completely still, the way a person does when stillness is the only way to not be pushed. Olivia felt the air thicken. She eased closer, careful not to crowd Monica, but certain that proximity mattered now. Ethan lifted his free hand in a small, open gesture that asked the crowd for quiet for focus, for witness. A single voice rose from the back of the line, not loud, not shrill, but clear. It spoke English with the flat insistence of someone who has had to repeat themselves across counters before and never wanted to get used to it. The lobby turned toward the sound that cut in the softest way possible through the practiced hospitality hum. A single voice rose from the crowd. "Let her speak!" And Monica lifted her head, her eyes bright. The first ripple of voices traveled the length of the marble like a slow tide. Phones rose in small arcs, each one a quiet lantern. The lilies held their perfume, the piano kept its gentle phrases, and the air felt charged in a way that rooms remember. There was no shouting, not yet. There was interest sharpened into attention, and attention discovering its own weight. A bellhop returned with an empty cart and paused by the floral display, reading the faces rather than the flowers. Outside, the avenue threw sunlight against the glass. Inside, the chandeliers drew a steady glow over a scene that now belonged to more than one perspective. Monica Johnson had not moved since the plea from the back of the line asked the room to let her speak. She lifted her head and looked along the counter as if measuring distance in something more reliable than feet. Her carry-on stood at her side like a quiet witness. She did not look at the camera in Olivia Parker's hand or the one in Ethan Miller's. She looked at Richard Collins, then Emily Turner, then Daniel Brooks, her gaze even and ungoaded, the way a person looks when they are still asking for ordinary fairness. Richard tried to reclaim the script with a tone that had served him before. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience," he said, managing half a smile. "We will resolve this quickly. Meizing, bye." He did not read the small shift in the crowd toward patience with the wrong person. A woman in a linen dress moved 3 steps closer and stood beside a man with a navy blazer whose briefcase rested against his ankle like a faithful dog. The family in baseball caps kept their place near the window. The older gentleman who had been pretending to study the lilies folded his newspaper more neatly, as though preparing to file it in a cabinet rather than recycle it. The barista at the cafe window leaned his elbows on the sill and forgot, for a moment, about wiping down the counter. Olivia adjusted her grip on her phone. She had filmed festivals and sunsets and the way light falls between buildings just before evening, but the steadiness she found now felt different, a kind of care. Ethan held his microphone closer to his lapel and spoke in a quiet tone that traveled. "The room is asking for a voice to be heard. The staff are insisting on a different process. Watch the decisions." Monica regarded Richard without rancor. "I will speak," she said, her voice carrying by clarity rather than force. "I arrived with a reservation and identification. I have presented both. I have been told to wait while my card is taken to the back. I will not consent to that. Verification, yes. Removal, no. There is a difference. We all know it. Why, 狗子." The sentence landed in a room built for pleasantries and felt, nonetheless, like the most polite thing anyone could say, the truth with its manners intact. The pianist sensed something in the air and chose a tune with a steady left hand, the kind that gives a place for words to sit. A guest in a straw hat nodded once, as if a point in an argument had been won. Richard's smile thinned. "Miss Johnson, the penthouse is a sensitive floor. Access requires absolute certainty." I go no. Certainty is not a privilege you grant to some and deny to others, Monica replied. Certainty is a process, and it does not require anyone to take my card behind the door. Emily glanced at the line as if to collect sympathy from strangers. She found eyes looking back at her without malice and without agreement. Daniel's hand hovered in the indecision of someone who has not yet understood that a small act can be the whole story. Sophia Martinez stood at the corner of the desk. The page she had printed sat plainly between the parties. The confirmation, the penthouse notation, the executive note. She felt the weight of a handbook on one shoulder and the weight of her upbringing on the other, and the second outweighed the first. She took a half step forward, enough to make her voice part of the scene without stealing it. "Miss Johnson's reservation is confirmed," she said to Richard and the room at once. "I saw it this morning. The notes are clear." "Thank you, Sophia," Richard said, each syllable filed sharp. "We are handling it." A woman near Olivia asked, softly but not privately. Handling what? She held her phone at her chest, camera off, as if it were a small shield rather than a tool. The man with the navy blazer added, in a public whisper, "This is not how you handle a confirmation." A new current moved through the comments on Olivia's stream. People started to name the steps they were seeing. Some wrote out the word policy and then asked what it means when it appears only after a certain kind of face. Others told stories of counters where the same ritual had unsmiled at them. The feed grew without frenzy, a braid of recollections, questions, and the simple sentence now appearing from different places. Let her speak. Richard tried to lift the room back onto rails. He softened his tone the way a person softens their voice for a small child who has made the wrong kind of noise in a library. "We cherish all our guests," he said. "We ask for understanding while we maintain standards." Monica regarded him evenly. Understanding runs both ways. Emily reached out again for the phone nearest her hand, a finger angling toward the intercom button. Sophia's eyes flicked to the move. "Please do not escalate," she said. Then added with measured propriety, "The guest has not violated any policy." Emily dropped her hand, not convinced, but outnumbered by attention. Daniel cleared his throat with the small sound people make when they wish the floor would swallow indecision. He looked to Richard for instruction. Richard did not glance at him. He kept his gaze on Monica, perhaps imagining a version of this in which charm recovers ground. He did not find it. Monica spoke again, with the soft patience of someone telling a waiter there is salt when the waiter insists there is not. "I am not an inconvenience," she said. "I am a guest in the lobby of a hotel. If I looked the way you expect a penthouse guest to look, we would not be having this conversation. If my blouse had a logo you recognized, if my luggage had a famous pattern, if my hair were a different texture, if my skin were a different shade, would we be here?" It did not sound like accusation. It sounded like a scale being set to 0. Olivia felt the sentence in her hands, in the way she gripped the phone. Ethan felt it in the mic, a vibration in the air that microphones are made for. From the back, the older gentleman lifted his folded newspaper a few inches, then lowered it again. The way a person might half raise a glass in a toast, he did not want to interrupt. "She is right," he said, not loudly. The timbre of his voice carried anyway. "This does not look like fairness." The family in baseball caps stepped a little closer. The mother took off her cap as if uncovering her head were a sign of respect. The boy looked up at Monica as if he had just met a person he might remember in the classroom story one day. The pianist resolved his phrase and found another one. Richard's veneer of patience thinned until the grain showed. "We cannot manage the lobby by committee," he said. "We have a procedure. We will follow it." He gestured with his chin, a small, silent order to move the card. Daniel, keyed by that flake of authority, lifted the small silver key again. Sophia leaned forward, her voice measured and kind, but anchored. "Sir, please do not take the guest card. The confirmation is here. We can complete check-in." Daniel paused. He looked down at the key as though it might counsel him. He looked at the confirmation page. He looked at Emily. He looked, almost against training, at Monica. Something in what he saw there made his wrist lower a fraction. Olivia angled the lens to catch the whole table of hands. The steady hands, the hovering hands, the hands that had touched and withdrawn. The comments moved like a school of fish shifting direction at once. People wrote that a concierge had saved them before. People wrote that this concierge might save the hotel from itself. People wrote that the manager had the chance to choose differently. In the cafe window, the barista whispered, "Come on," to no one in particular, the way a person whispers to a story they want to see end right. Richard aimed the smile again, but now it looked like a portrait whose paint had cracked. "We offer you a standard room," he told Monica, as though generosity might be mistaken for grace. "Complimentary upgrade when the matter is resolved." "Resolved," Monica said, "would mean you looked for my reservation as carefully as you looked at me." "Eh?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Emily set her palm on the counter, pressing away a tension she could not name. Daniel set the key down without quite letting go. Sophia kept her eyes on Monica as if eye contact could anchor two people to the same plank. Outside, a bus sighed at the curb and a gust of lake air slipped around the revolving door. cooling the edges of the lobby. A woman in a floral dress stepped inside, felt the temperature of the room, and did not join the line. She stood beside the man with the navy blazer and looked on with the calm of someone who has argued at counters before and learned exactly when not to speak. A new sound entered. The chime of a phone from somewhere in the crowd, and then another, and then the low chorus of notifications arriving at once. Olivia glanced at her screen. The stream's numbers were climbing, but the numbers were not the point. The point was the steadiness of sentences appearing. I have been there. I am here now. Do not look away. Ethan spoke in his measured way, the broadcaster's tone that carries without shouting. We are witnessing a moment of decision, he said. A guest has stated her case clearly. The staff have a choice. Monica turned to include the line not because she needed their sanction, but because a room like this has rules about who is seen and who is not, and she had decided to be seen without anyone's permission. I will say this, and then I will be quiet while you do your jobs, she said. I have not raised my voice. I have not broken a rule. I have not asked for more than I reserved and paid for. I am asking you to treat me as you would treat anyone who looks like what you expect a penthouse guest to look like. Silence followed, not the brittle kind that precedes a scolding, but the deep kind that follows the statement of a truth so familiar people forget they are allowed to say it. Richard's face worked, trying to find an expression that might place him back in control. He chose authority. Security will be joining us, he said quietly, and touched the intercom. The button gave under his finger with a small, public click. The word security leaked into the air like a draft. Sophia felt the click like a bruise. Sir, she said, that is not necessary. She folded her hands over the printed confirmation in a way that made the page look less like paper and more like ground. Emily's jaw tightened. We cannot have the lobby disrupted, she murmured. A woman near the lilies responded with a sentence that had no accusation in it at all. The disruption, she said, began when you stopped respecting the reservation. The pianist, perhaps deciding that words were louder than notes now, softened his volume to the edge of hearing, leaving space for the dialogue that needed the room. The elevator chimed and opened, and the couple stepped out with shopping bags, paused, read the air, and did not step farther. The bellhop guided his empty cart to one side and leaned against the handle in a posture that workers use when they know their posture is part of the testimony. Olivia kept filming. Ethan kept narrating. Sophia kept standing. Monica kept breathing. Richard kept trying to make the world remember it was his lobby. Emily kept the card under her fingers. Daniel kept the key half down, half up, the undecided angle of a man learning which way is forward. A man in a gray suit addressed Richard in the level tone of a frequent traveler who knows how a lobby should feel. Sir, he said, I have stayed in properties like this for decades. This is not the standard you say you are upholding. Richard did not answer him. He could not cede the conversation to the crowd and still call himself in charge. He was choosing a script that had worked before. He did not notice that the room had changed the channel. Monica let the room sit with what was already said. She did not repeat herself. She did not plead. She did not ask for mercy because justice needs no mercy to be itself. She looked at Sophia and saw there the courage of a person who tells a simple truth when it is not simple to tell it. From Olivia's vantage, it was possible to see the small triangle formed by Monica, Sophia, and the printed page. And in that triangle was a geometry anyone could understand. Person, witness, proof. The comments settled into fewer words and calmer ones. We see you. We are here. Do right. Emily shifted first. She removed her hand from the card. The gesture was tiny and felt like a bell. Daniel set the key fully on the counter, metal touching lacquer, sound thin and real. Richard stared at the items and then at his team with something like disbelief crossing his face. Sophia took the opening and slid the confirmation a few inches toward Daniel. Complete the check-in, she said, softly enough to pass for a suggestion and firmly enough to serve as a direction. Richard's head snapped toward her. That will be all, Sophia, he said. The words clipped so cleanly they almost cut. She did not move. She had decided to stand up straight. The lobby inhaled again, the collective breath of a place that knows it is witnessing itself. And then the smallest, most ordinary sound in the scene arrived with the weight of a verdict. Monica's phone, resting in her tote, vibrated once against the canvas lining, A muted trill, as polite as any ringtone could be. She lifted it and glanced at the screen. The name there drew a calm into her eyes that the room had not yet seen, and the bridge between music and silence had been waiting for. Monica's phone vibrated. Clara Mitchell, calling her voice crisp. "We have the evidence." Clara's voice cut through the lobby's soft music with the steadiness of a metronome. Monica put the call on speaker, laying the phone beside the printed confirmation so the words would travel the same path as the doubt that had been walking the counter all afternoon. "We have the evidence," Clara said, and the simple sentence gathered the room like a bell. The barista at the cafe window leaned in. The bellhop straightened his back. The pianist thinned his volume until it felt like a heartbeat. Monica did not look at the cameras or the crowd first. She looked at Richard Collins, then at Emily Turner, then at Daniel Brooks, her gaze as even as the countertop between them. Clara continued, her voice crisp and calm, the way a surgeon discusses a plan. Front desk logs show an executive-level reservation under the name Monica Johnson, penthouse suite, arrival today. The account is tag owner level. Internal notes confirm VIP amenities. I am sending the screenshots and the time-stamped audit trail to your device now. Monica's phone chimed once, a polite sound that felt like a verdict. Richard's eyes flashed toward the screen and then away again. Emily's fingers twitched near the black card. Daniel's hand hovered uselessly over the small silver key that had nearly become an emblem. Sophia Martinez folded her hands, letting herself breathe. She had held her breath longer than she realized. Monica spoke without raising her volume. "Mr. Collins, you and your team have asked for certainty. Here it is." She tapped the phone gently. "The system that makes your lobby possible has always known who I am." Richard tried to collect the room back into his authority. "We cannot verify corporate documents over a personal phone," he said. "That is not how we operate. This could be fabricated." "It is not fabricated," Clara said. A brief rustle of paper sounded on the line, then keys against the desk. "Legal is on, compliance is on, and information security is on. We have mirrored the data to the hotel servers. If you refresh your terminal, you will see the note you have pretended not to see." Daniel, cheeks warm, refreshed. The name populated with clinical certainty. His throat tightened. He cleared it. "It is here," he said. "The admission small and clean. Penthouse. Executive note, VIP tag. Emily," as jaw stiffened. "We still need to protect the brand," she said, clinging to the phrase the way a person clings to a railing when the floor shifts. Policy dictates fairness," Monica said, and the softness in her tone made the sentence land with more weight than iron. Olivia Parker did not speak into her mic. She let the lens do its work. Ethan Miller narrated in a low register that carried to the phones and the farthest corners of the room. "The logs have arrived," he said. "The name is in the system. The manager's resisting acknowledgement." The comment stream settled into sentences shaped by focus rather than frenzy. People typed that they could see the truth sitting on the counter and on the screen and in the set of a concierge's shoulders. Richard changed tactics and tried charm worn thin. "Miss Johnson," he said, "we regret the inconvenience. There was clearly a misunderstanding. If you would like, we can move you into a lovely suite while we finalize." Monica lifted a hand, not to silence him, but to make space for what came next. "Rachel," she said into the phone, "please join." A new voice arrived, precise and unhurried. "This is Rachel Evans." The room recognized authority that did not need to be declared. "I oversee human resources at the group level. Mr. Collins, Ms. Turner, Mr. Brooks, I am addressing you directly. Our audit shows a pattern of conduct today that violates hospitality standards, legal policy, and common sense." Rachel did not raise her tone when she said the word pattern, but the syllables had more gravity than the chandelier. She continued, each phrase the length of a breath. "Guest profiling, unwarranted seizure of property, public humiliation, disregard of internal confirmation when presented by a fellow employee, repeated escalation against an unresisting guest. The camera is not the issue. Your behavior is." Emily glanced at Richard, eyes widening for the first time. Daniel stared at the terminal, willing the data to mean something different. Richard found his last familiar lever and reached for it. "We manage a premium floor," he said. "Appearance matters. Our guests expect a certain kind of respect," Monica said, gently, completing the sentence without taking it where he wanted it to go. Rachel spoke again. Ems, Johnson, do you authorize immediate employment action? Monica looked at Sophia and nodded once, as if to include her in the circle of witness. Then she looked at the room because rooms remember. Her words were plain. I do, effective now. Rachel did not pause. Richard Collins, Emily Turner, Daniel Brooks. Effective immediately, your employment with this property is terminated for cause. Your system access is revoked. Your presence on the floor is no longer authorized. Security will escort you to the staff exit. You will not speak to or approach any guest. She added, in a tone that was stern without cruelty, compliance will contact you regarding next steps. It happened like a light scattering, swift and definitive. Daniel's badge beeped against the side panel with a muted denial. Emily's terminal logged her out and refused her re-entry. Richard's code failed when he tried to pretend the drawer had jammed. The small safe clicked uselessly when he pressed its keypad, a stubborn metal reminder that the world he managed was not his to own. A hushed exhale spread across the lobby. It was not triumphal yet. It was the sound of a room understanding that a hinge had turned. The pianist found a slow chord and let it hang in the air like a ceiling catching sunlight. The bellhop did not move, because some stillnesses are also a way of agreeing. Richard slapped his palm flat on the counter, a gesture he would later tell himself was an appeal to order. This is outrageous, he said. You cannot do this in public. We have a brand to maintain. We have procedures. Rachel answered with a kind of calm that ends arguments without fire. The brand is maintained when the truth is honored. The procedure is simple. You turn a guest into a problem when she was a guest. That ends now. Maid on day to friend on the... Emily found the thread of apology and tried to braid it with self-preservation. I did not mean to, she began. Monica met her eyes without heat. You did, she said. But you can decide differently the next time you stand on the other side of a counter. Daniel spoke to no one and everyone. I was following instructions, he said, the words falling out of him like coins he would rather have kept. Sophia's voice carried the gentleness of a person who chooses steady over righteous. You had a choice, she told him, and even that was not a scolding. Richard turned to Monica with a look that could not hold on to authority any longer, so it reached for a different accusation. Why did you not say who you were? He demanded, the question ridiculous the moment it left his mouth. You set us up. Monica did not smile. I walked in like any other guest, she said. Your team taught a lesson you have taught before. Today it had an audience. They heard no. Olivia's phone trembled, not from fear, but from the way the human hand is honest when it records something that feels historic. Ethan spoke just above a whisper. A termination has been executed over the phone, on camera, in the lobby, he said, sentences even and unadorned. A guest who was asked to prove herself has proven the system instead. Rachel's voice softened by a shade. Miss Johnson, would you like to name an acting manager? Monica did not hesitate. She turned to Sophia. Sophia Martinez will assume interim leadership of guest services, she said. Effective now. Sophia's mouth opened without sound. She closed it, looked at the paper in front of her, and then at Monica. Yes, she said, the word the size of a future. A tiny, surprised laugh escaped her and turned quickly into a breath. She steadied with both hands. The lilies seemed to breathe with her. The barista clapped once before, remembering this was still a lobby and not a small theater. Richard tried once more, aiming for a tone he imagined made him sound like a steward of standards rather than a man whose feet had just found air. You are humiliating us, he said. You are turning this into a spectacle. Monica regarded him as if the question were not what this was, but what it had been. I am turning nothing, she said. I am naming what already happened. The cameras did not make it true. They only made it visible. Yes, Rachel completed the administrative arc with a sentence that felt like a door closing softly but with a lock. Security has been notified, she said. They will escort the former employees. Miss Johnson, your suite is ready. Emily took her hand off the card as if it had become hot. Daniel set the small key down as though it were guilty. Richard looked at the faces in the line and saw in them something he had not wanted to measure. Not anger alone, but a withdrawal of consent. The people who had once allowed his tone to define the room were not allowing it now. The older gentleman with the folded newspaper stepped forward with the discretion of someone who made a career out of saying important things at the right volume. "Young lady," he said to Sophia, "careful with the formality. I hope you will make a very fine manager." Sophia swallowed and nodded, her eyes shining in a way cameras would translate as bright. Monica lifted her phone again. "Rachel, please remain on the line," she said. "Clara, thank you. I will need legal to log this as a training moment for the entire group, not just a correction. We will audit any outstanding complaints at this property from the last year and a half. Sophia, please begin the manual check-in for our waiting guests. Offer water from the caffeine and our apologies. Real ones." Sophia straightened. "Yes," she said. "I will start now." She looked at the cafe window. The barista nodded, already pouring glasses and sliding them to the counter with a small flourish he used for cappuccino leaves. A woman in a floral dress accepted the cup and said, "Thank you," and the barista answered with a quiet, "Glad to," because he was. The family in baseball caps stayed where they were, not because they needed anything, but because sometimes witness is also a form of service. The boy whispered, "That was brave," to his mother, and she said, "Yes," without taking her eyes off the counter. Emily's lips parted in a final defense that could not carry weight anymore. "We were thinking of the image," she said, and then the sentence dissolved under its own pretension. "The image is a reflection," Monica said. "It shows what you are doing, not what you say about it." Richard turned to go and found that habits keep a person in place even after a badge says otherwise. He looked down at his hands as if they might tell him who he was without a desk. For a flicker, he seemed smaller than the suit he wore. He reached toward the safe again by instinct, and the safe answered with a flat tone that means no. Clara's voice came through once more. "Media are watching. The stream is spreading. Your voice is carrying the story, Monica. We can also issue a statement." "We will," Monica said. "But first, we will do the work the statement describes." She turned to the room. "If anyone here has experienced discourtesy or worse in this lobby, Sophia will take your name and we will follow up within 48 hours. We will not send a form letter. We will respond." A murmur of surprise and relief swept across the floor, the sort that does not need exclamation to be felt. The pianist lifted the melody a little, as if untangling a knot with music. The bellhop smiled and offered to help an elderly woman with her bag. She accepted, thanked him by name, and let him lift the weight she had been pretending was light. Richard tried once more to throw a line into water that had moved on. "You will regret doing this in public," he said, low and bitter. "You will make enemies." Monica answered with a softness that had no surrender in it. "The only regret I have is every time I let a moment like this pass without naming it." She turned to Sophia. "Please retrieve my card from the counter." Sophia moved with steady steps, lifted the card as if it were more than a rectangle of plastic, and handed it to Monica with both hands. "Welcome, Miss Johnson," she said, and the welcome sounded truer than any scripted line because the speaker meant it. For a breath, the lobby held still, as if the scene wanted to memorize itself. Then someone on the far side clapped, once, unsure. Then someone else, twice. And then the sound gathered from hands. Not loud, not a roar, but undeniable. The clap was not for a spectacle. It was for a correction, overdue and accomplished without swagger. Olivia framed Monica and Sophia in the same shot, the counter between them now a place of passage rather than a border. Ethan lowered his voice another degree, as if what he said were not commentary but prayer. "A lobby has just become a classroom," he murmured. "Lesson 1, fairness," spoken aloud. Richard stepped backward, looking for the exit path that used to open for him whenever he wanted it. It did not open now. He brushed against the edge of the counter, knocked the small silver key with his knuckles, so that it made a bright, brittle sound, and startled at the noise as though it accused him. He took another step back, the color sliding from his face in a way the cameras could not soften. The room that had once bent toward his voice did not bend. Instead, it lifted into something else. Richard stepped back, his face drained, while the entire lobby, erupted in cheers. Justice had prevailed. The sound in the lobby changed after the cheers faded. The way a lake goes from wind-tossed to glass when the weather turns. People lowered their phones as if setting down small lanterns. A few guests stepped forward to speak with Sophia, and she received them with the steady hands of someone who understands that apologies are not words alone. She asked the cat for water and passed the cups with a quiet thank you. The barista poured without being asked, his routine turning hospitable in a way that needed no script. The bellhop guided an elderly traveler to a chair by the lilies and offered to hold her bag a moment. She thanked him by name because she read his badge and because that is how courtesy feels when it is honest. Monica remained at the counter long enough to make sure the room settled into a new balance. She declined the impulse to make a speech. Instead, she called Clara back and asked for a single page, a brief message on hotel letterhead, acknowledging what had occurred and promising follow-up within 48 hours for anyone who wanted it. Sophia stood beside her, absorbing the cadence of decisions made without rush and without retreat. Olivia and Ethan filmed less now, choosing to capture short, quiet vignettes. The concierge printing forms, the barista setting out small plates of cookies on the house, the older gentleman folding his newspaper and sliding it into a recycle bin as if filing a record. Monica invited the guests who had waited longest to the desk first. She asked each for a last name, repeated it correctly, confirmed room preferences, and said welcome in a tone that sounded like the word meant something. She offered sincere apologies for the delay. She did not assign the apology to the air. She stood in it. The lobby responded with the small graces Americans know in their bones. Murmured, "It is all right." Handshakes for staff, a folded bill in the bellhop's palm, a nod to the barista with $1 in the tip jar. When the couple in linen jackets finally received their keys, the husband turned to Monica and said that what they had witnessed was not an inconvenience. It was a lesson. She accepted the sentence with a nod that did not make it larger than it was. By late afternoon, the queue had thinned. The pianist let the melody brighten by a shade, and the music made the chandeliers flicker warmer. Sophia set up a small station near the concierge podium and began collecting names from anyone who wished to be contacted by management. She listened more than she wrote, and that, more than anything, steadied the space. Monica walked the length of the lobby once, then entered the back office for the first time that day. It smelled faintly of copier heat and coffee that had sat too long. She stood at the desk, called Rachel, and spoke without ceremony. The words arranged themselves as they needed to. A full audit of guest complaints at the property for the past year and a half. A temporary pause on non-essential front desk functions until the team could be briefed. The appointment of Sophia as interim lead with authority to prioritize service and safety. Rachel asked precise questions. Monica answered them with the kind of clarity that makes paperwork move fast. Clara's email landed with an audible ping. A draft for the one-page statement. Monica read it aloud, changed 3 phrases, and approved it. When she stepped back into the lobby, the sunlight had shifted, throwing a golden band across the marble. She addressed the room not with a speech, but with sentences that felt like a handshake. The staff repeated those sentences in smaller circles to those who could not hear. A woman in a floral dress who had been there from the beginning squeezed Sophia's hand as she passed and whispered that not all days in a life feel useful, but this one did. Sophia thanked her and swallowed hard in the way people do when they are not prepared for tears. The boy in the baseball cap waved toward the piano and asked his mother if the music had changed. She said yes, and that sometimes music knows what a room needs before people do. The evening that followed unfolded in ordinary acts. That was the point. Monica accepted a room key not because she needed the gesture, but because accepting it allowed the floor to learn the proper choreography again. She ate a sandwich sent up from room service, not fancy, just good, and tipped generously. She reviewed the overnight plan with Clara and Rachel on a short call at 9 in the evening, and they kept their words plain. At 10 in the evening, Olivia posted a measured update, not a victory lap, not an indictment, just a record of what had changed between 1 hour and the next. Ethan edited a 2-minute cut for the morning shows that focused on Sophia's calm and a sentence Monica had said about fairness. Their viewers, many of them older, wrote that they had been in lobbies like this and had left with their stories unrecorded. Now, something was on the record. 3 months later began without fanfare. The peninsula, Chicago, looked the same to people hurrying past on Michigan Avenue. Lilies by the desk, brass bright, doormen in dark coats, when the wind off the lake turned unkind. Inside, however, the air felt clarified. A framed card near the entrance carried a line that guests read and sometimes photographed. This space belongs to every guest, no exceptions. People smiled at it the way people smile at a promise that someone means to keep. Training sessions had filled the weeks between. Monica required a third-party firm to lead them, not to punish, but to teach without fear. Staff gathered in the ballroom on slow afternoons, sat at round tables with water pitchers and notepads, and watched scenario videos that were painfully familiar. They spoke into small microphones so their voices would carry, and they listened to each other describe moments when they had chosen the easy habit over the right one. Sophia, now officially the manager, opened each session with a reminder that everyone deserved to be greeted as if they belonged. She did not read it from a card. She said it like a toast. The all-day stretched beyond Chicago. Rachel and Clara helped coordinate cooperation across properties without making it sound like a raid. The words Owner Levin moved quietly through the system, not as a code to announce a hierarchy, but as a reverence for responsibility. Monica declined the press requests that were only hungry for spectacle. She made time for 2 interviews that focused on procedure, on how to replace defensiveness with a clearer standard. She suggested that other hotels adopt the one-page letterhead protocol for public acknowledgement when harm happened. When asked on the record whether she had planned the moment, she said that she had planned for professionalism and that anything else had planned itself by habit. The lobby changed in dozens of small ways that only regulars noticed. A stand with complimentary water appeared near the window, not to fix what had gone wrong, but to make welcome visible. The barista added a simple sign. First coffee for returning guests is on us. The bellhop moved the luggage stand a few feet so people using walkers had a straight path. A housekeeping supervisor built a checklist that included a question about whether any guest interaction should be reviewed for coaching. It was not punitive. It was preventative. Letters went out to those who had left their names the day of the incident. They did not come from a generic account. They bore Sophia's signature, and they invited specific stories. Some replies were brief, some were long. One man wrote that he had stopped traveling because lobbies made him feel like he was applying for permission to exist. Sophia wrote back to thank him and offered to call. He said yes. The next month, he came to Chicago to see his daughter and stayed at the hotel. He stopped by the desk before leaving and said it had felt like oxygen. Later that evening, the staff shared his words over a staff meal. Olivia and Ethan returned for the new sign's quiet unveiling. They did not ask for a stage. They stood with a few guests near the entrance and filmed the moment the plaque was mounted. Ethan spoke a single sentence about how policy looks when you can touch it. Olivia posted a short clip of Sophia reading a line about belonging. In the comments, people in their 70s and 80s wrote that they had waited a long time to see someone in charge say the quiet part out loud. On a late afternoon in September, the light rested on the marble like warm silk. A group of seniors arrived by bus after a museum tour. They wore comfortable shoes and carried the contentment of a day well spent. The desk welcomed them by name. The bellhop took their bags and did not hurry them. The calf set out a platter of cookies and offered decaf to those who wanted it. An older woman paused by the sign, read it slowly, and pressed her palm against the glass as if feeling the promise under her hand. She nodded once and moved on. Just before dinner, a couple approached the desk with a question. Monica had stopped by to check on a software update and happened to be nearby. The couple asked for an early breakfast the next day because they wanted to see the lake at sunrise. Sophia arranged it in less than a minute and added a small note for the kitchen, a thermos of hot chocolate for the walk. The man grinned like a child. The woman said that she had not expected kindness to be so efficient. Monica stepped back, pleased by the grace of it, kindness that wastes no one's time. Evenings brought small symmetries. Staff finished shifts and headed to the corner diner for meatloaf or pancakes. They slid into red vinyl booths and compared notes about tricky check-ins, laughing now because the trick had become a shared puzzle, not a private test. They left tip money in a small stack under the lip of the plate and said thank you to the server by name. The walk back to the hotel felt shorter because the wind was behind them and because they were walking toward a place that felt less like a stage and more like a vocation. On an ordinary weekday morning, a guest approached the desk wearing a sweatshirt and carrying a canvas tote. The scene could have replicated an old pattern. It did not. The desk clerk looked up, smiled the smile he saved for beginnings, and said, "Good morning," without asking the tote to prove itself. The guest smiled back, said her name, and the clerk repeated it correctly. The check-in took 2 minutes, not because the room was empty, but because respect is a fast language when you practice it. Rachel's quarterly visit happened at the end of that month. She sat with Sophia and the team in the small office and reviewed the audit findings. The numbers were dry by design, the stories were not. The trendline bent toward decent. They discussed what to do when fatigue returns, because it always does. They agreed to schedule refreshers, not as punishment, but as ritual. Monica joined for the final 15 minutes, thanked the team, and asked for ideas that did not fit a spreadsheet. The bellhop said that name badges might look friendlier with pronouns reserved for those who want them. The barista asked if the hotel could cover a neighborhood coffee training. Sophia requested a tiny budget for fresh flowers at the concierge desk once a month. Monica approved all three without delay, because sometimes leadership is about saying yes to small things first. That evening, a woman who had written one of the first letters came by to say she had not stopped thinking about that day. She was in her 60s, wore a navy cardigan, and spoke in a measured Midwestern cadence. She thanked Monica for acting without rage. She thanked Sophia for speaking truth in her inside voice. She thanked the barista for the first glass of water. She did not mention Richard or Emily or Daniel. She did not need to. When she left, Sophia sat for a moment at the empty desk and breathed. The way a room breathes after a storm leaves it cleaner. As summer folded into early fall, the city changed its colors. Taste of Chicago had long packed up. The lake sent colder air up the avenue. The doorman switched to coats that made them look like guardians of warmth. The lobby held steady. It was not perfect. No place is. But it behaved as if it remembered what it was for. To welcome people first and process them second. Staff made mistakes, and they corrected them faster. Guests asked questions, and the answers sounded less like scripts and more like help. If a moment at the desk began to tilt toward an old posture, often Sophia tilted it back with a sentence that did not accuse but reminded. On a late afternoon, a washing ember, Monica stepped out through the revolving door with a slim paper cup in hand. She had stopped at the corner caf for a to-go order and left a tip that made the barista smile wide enough to show surprise. The street smelled faintly of roasted beans and lake wind. A bus sighed. A cyclist coasted past with a bell that chimed the way a small good idea sounds. She paused at the curb, looked back at the facade, and saw in the reflection not her own face, but the way people moved through the doors without slowing to brace. She stood in that look for a beat, long enough to feel what it means when a room does its job. She turned toward the avenue again. The light leaned into evening, and glass caught it in bright panels. She took a breath, the kind that counts as a prayer when there are no words to shape it. Monica smiled, took a sip of to-go coffee from the corner cafe. The Chicago sunset reflecting in her eyes. Justice would not win only once. It would keep spreading. The lobby no longer carried the weight of confrontation, but the quiet grace of ordinary welcomes, the kind that make travelers feel at home. What began as a painful unveiling of prejudice had become a turning point where humility and accountability grew roots. In that change was a lesson both simple and profound. Dignity belongs to everyone who steps through a doorway, and when it is withheld, the cost is heavier than we first see. Like a steady lamp in a kitchen window, a single act of fairness can guide us back to who we hoped we were all along. So as you reflect on this story, let it remind you to notice the small gestures of kindness around you. And if it touched you, consider passing that warmth forward to someone who may need it more than you know.